So this is episode 7 of Prologue is Amazing, and I'm gonna talk about something I've been thinking for the past day about programming, the methodology for developing apps, right, and how I'm gonna develop apps. So when I read Philip and Alex's guide to web publishing like 25 years ago, he suggested it's like you're supposed to think of the relational database first. Like you're supposed to create the logical model, like kind of the entity relationship model, right? And like think of the entities and the relations between them, and then work from there forward, right? So you kind of basically you work from the back end to the fore, and that influenced me, and I thought that way. And in Prologue as well, you're supposed to think of, the relationships between entities and model that, and then you go to the thing. But, and I think that is the right way. But lately I've been thinking, it's like, well, yesterday I was like, what's an easier way, or what's a way for a simpleton? Like, you don't want to think too much to do app development. And maybe the way is how most people do it is they start with the user interface, right? So you start with, okay, this is a screen and these are the buttons that need to be on the screen, and this, right? And then like you design all the screens first, and then you go to the back, right? Now that's the opposite of what Philip Greenspan or what proper relational database design or Prologue design says you should do. Now, why am I thinking this? Because I was thinking, it's like, how can I do stuff simply and, not require too much thought, right? Like, how can I be dumb but still program? And also, I was thinking, how can I program without my a computer? Like, how can I just do it on the phone? And maybe it's like I can just edit together in a paint program, like different screens. And so I was thinking that, and then I went to, it's like, well, why even do it on a phone? Why not just get notebooks, right? So like an exercise book. Each exercise or notebook would be an app by itself, right? So you want it like not so you want to design like 20, 30 different screens for an app. So it should be somewhere around notebook size and not more than that, right? You don't want too much functionality or complexity in the app to start off with, right? Like your first version. So that would be a good decent size, and you can just write with pen or pencil and just draw out app screens right there. And then the thing would be also that it's like you start with a user interface, and then you're like, this thing goes to the back, right? And then a power of Prologue would be, it's like all the data from your screen is being sent. Like you can think of like the data that gets sent to the back, and then you can just think of like all the data is just going off into the back as data, right? And you can use Prologue because of it. It's a great data query language to tie it all up, right? So you can think of your app as just, here's a bunch of stuff that goes to the back, and then, oh, I need to just create some queries from Prologue to create reports or create some of the screens, the data in the screens that comes from that data, right? And that's a good, like, Prologue is well suited to something like that for data, report generation, information extraction from like stuff that's just going into there. So I was thinking like that. And then there was a second thing. Well, I mean, if you get good at it, and Phillips Greenspan in his book, or I think in a internet applications book, or some other book he wrote that's online course, it's like you can have ontologies and generate your program from them. And then I was, I was thinking, it's like that's in Prolog, like you can just kind of, maybe you can go back to just thinking of entities and relations, and then the user interface automatically is generated. So for a concrete example, let's say I'm trying to create a video editing app, right? I'm trying to create a documentary making app. So in it, like I could be like, well, screens. So I have video segments, and like a documentary is a linear, combination of segments of video. So the app could be an app screen where it just shows you two segments from all the possible segments, and like which one should go first, and you just click this one or this one should go first, and then it gives you another screen, and you're like, this which should go first. So you can basically you can like tell which segment after the other constitutes the documentary or video by just clicking yes or no, right? So you can think of it as the screen, like that's the screen based workflow. You think of a screen like that, and then you create another screen like that, and another. But you could also start from the opposite end, where you're like, okay, video segments is a thing, and they have an ordering relation, like before and after, right? And then that screen would have been generated, and maybe there's other entities which have an ordering relation. Maybe, like which segment is more important. Like maybe you have 1,000 video segments, and you can only put 10 or 100 of them in the video. So maybe like there's ordering relations of what comes before or after the other, but there could be an ordering relation of which is more important or less important, right? And you can just have a screen which says more or less. But do you get it? You either have to think of that screen, or you could have the ontology. You can have it in Prolog, like video segments, and they have multiple kinds of relations between them. Like one is before or after, one is more important, less important. And continuing with other entities as well, maybe sounds or whatever. You can start to think about it, right? And then that would generate the types of screens that are required, right? So that would be kind of like going from the back end to the forward end. But it wouldn't be like how, traditionally it's done, like Paul Graham was saying, or maybe he was saying something like that, but traditionally it's like you create entity relationship diagrams, and then you write queries and to look at that, and that's how you create the front end. This thing I'm talking about is like you have an entity relationship model, and then all the queries are also generated from it, right? Like it's kind of like a meta programming. It's like you have that, and then the queries are generated. So all the queries generated, all the front end is generated, right? So there's that as well. So and the biggest strength of Prolog is the meta programming, right? Because a Prolog is the source code, according to Marcus Triska and the Power of Prolog. The biggest benefit of superpower of Prolog is that it's the most meta programmable language, right? Like the source code is just database, and you can manipulate that to your heart's content. So yeah, but I think first I'm gonna start off with just getting notebooks and going to the local university library and getting books on, like, let's say I want to create an app for documentaries, get a book on documentary making and study that, and take out the lessons or the practices that the book advocates, and put them in software and systemize that, and like maybe the questions to ask, well, that just make that as part of the app, right? Like in the book there would be like, as a documentary filmmaker, you should consider this, and you should ask this question and this question about your documentary. Like systematically put that into an app, so that making a documentary as simple as like clicking buttons and a documentary is generated. So that is so I'm thinking like, I won't even be using computers to begin with. I'll just have notebooks and textbooks and be creating screens and taking information from the textbooks and writing out the questions to ask. But maybe I'll do it on a laptop, but I'm thinking at first I might just do it on paper, right? And maybe like go to parks and just write it out there. So yeah, that's a thing. And then, as I'm doing that, I might start just like writing prologue on paper and thinking about, entities and like ontologies, and then how they meta programming can generate programs and apps just from the model of that, right? Like from, you just define an ontology and then you do meta programming rules, and then an entire app is generated just from that, right? And then that would be a great method of creating apps in the future, right? Like once you have that meta programming layer, then you can just, all you have to do is create ontologies and entire apps come out every time, rather than going through all the method of creating the screens or a full entity relationship model and then the screen. It's like, if you define, like, let's say if you define the relationship between 10 different concepts, the relations, maybe there are like 50 different relations among them, an app of hundreds of screens is generated automatically, right? That's the goal. That's a future possibility that is maybe possible if you use Prolog to its full extent and the power inherent in meta programming it.